The show where there are no penalties, nothing is offside, and everything is fair game. This is The Gloves Are Off.
Welcome to The Gloves Are Off, this week's edition. My name is Moses Woldo, and we're glad to bring you the great topics that happened over the last week in sports. Before we get to them, I'll have to get to our guests. My co-host, first and foremost, Greg Buchanan, CPCA radio announcer, plus you're also the Junior B Bandits hockey general manager.
Not too bad, Moses. How you doing?
Fantastic. We're going to have a great topic to talk about, especially with this guy. BJ Carey, you are a driver at the CPCA. Now, you had a great season last year, just missed out in winning in Lloyd, but you're back in 2013 and excited for great things to come this year.
You bet. How are you, Moses?
I am good. All right, well, let's talk about other players who've been good. Of course, the top three draft picks, potential draftees in the NHL draft upcoming. They were at the Memorial Cup. They played twice, of course, referring to Portland and Halifax. Halifax having Nate McKinnon and Jonathan Drouin. Portland, possibly the number one guy, a top-rated D-man in Seth Jones. Out of those three guys and the performance they had in the Memorial Cup and the Memorial Cup final, who would you of those three would take number one?
Oh, I'd have to go with McKinnon. I just think he's an all-around player. I wasn't really impressed with Drouin, but McKinnon would be my first pick if I had that choice.
Seth Jones for me, hands down. Just knowing in hockey, skilled forwards come along. There's a lot of skilled forwards out there. But when you have a defenseman that can log 20 minutes or more per game, play every situation, that's what Seth Jones can do. He's tough. He can move the puck. He has some offensive skills too. That finding a defenseman like him, they don't come around too often.
And I guess with Colorado, who has the number one overall pick, it's going to be a really tough decision and a tough dilemma because both of you are picking some great guys. Drouin might be the outside guy looking in because I know he started slowly, but he had a fantastic tournament, 1 goal. He had 8 assists. He had 5 in the final. So he's proven to be a big game player. But if you're the Colorado Avalanche, do you take a guy like Seth Jones because he's a big, strong defenseman and he'll help out your back end because, of course, they do have the forwards up front, or do you add in another sniper, another player like a McKinnon or Drouin on the outside, but do you bring them in and then have essentially a solid 2-forward line?
I think because it's Colorado, I think they're going to take Seth Jones, but and that's with me going with McKinnon. That's just me. Colorado, they are weaker on the back end. I think, and I think they would take Seth Jones. Whereas if it was another team, I think McKinnon would be the number one guy.
Yeah, rightly so. Like, look at Colorado. They have Duchesne up front, one of the best young forwards in the game right now. And they have some other good young talent. Their first 2 lines aren't bad. Third and fourth are a little suspect. But I think on the back end, a guy that can anchor your back end. I'm not saying Seth Jones is going to step into the Avs lineup in the fall and all of a sudden get all these minutes, but he's a guy that's going to be 10 or 15 years probably in his career with the Avalanche, or at least in the NHL.
He's a Denver kid too, so also helps with the hometown feel. They need to put butts into the seats. Patrick Waugh obviously is not going to do that if he's sitting behind the bench, right? Hey, I do want to talk about the head coaches and the play that you're seeing from the Chicago Blackhawks and the Detroit Red Wings. Of course, you have 2 different opposite sides. You have, of course, Babcock and you have Quenneville. But the play from Game 6 I found interesting was the fact that you had Taves kind of emerge a little bit. I know he was in the shadows of guys like Datsuk, who was really probably one of the best, I would say, 2-way forwards in the game, coming out and producing 2 assists, helping his team win. Does this victory, especially at Joe Louis, because they've struggled there, does this help this team, Game 7, home ice, momentum-wise, has shifted Chicago, or to Chicago?
To a certain extent, yes, but Game 7, anything can happen. And this series has been, look at last night's game. Detroit, for 40 minutes, they looked like they had it. In the first 8 minutes of the third, it was lights out Chicago, and Detroit seemed to be backpedaling, and they didn't take the game to Chicago. Chicago took the game to them, and now they go to Chicago for Game 7, and I think the first 10 minutes of that Game 7 is going to determine the outcome of that game.
I agree with that. And in Game 6, Chicago kept it simple. They just put the puck to the net. All 4 goals were scored by putting the puck into the net, and they were banged in, all 4 of them. So keeping it simple like that against Detroit is going to be the key, I think.
And the scary thing for Detroit right now is that in last night's game, it was Chicago's 3rd and 4th line that was contributing. Their top guys like Kane and Taves and even Sharp, they weren't a factor really in the game. They did have some good minutes and good shifts, but at the same time,
you said that third period, that's when everything started to roll.
Over,
but it just started with a lucky bounce. What do you talk about the penalty shot though? Frolik, was that a penalty shot in your case?
Questionable.
Did
That
he
was
give him a little bit of tap? Didn't really see like he hit the hand. So.
Yeah, I think it kind of depends on the ref. I don't think back in the day, I don't think Van Halen or Van Heusen would have called that a penalty shot. So, but yeah, it depends on the ref. I think it was questionable.
That's a defenseman speaking. As a forward, you're coming in there and you're about to take that shot, and he hacks you in the hands. It should have been a penalty shot.
And he made good on his promise, and it ended up being the game winner. Let's talk about the Penguins and Bruins. The West Final still hasn't been determined just yet. Of course, the Kings are playing tonight against the Sharks. But you have Pittsburgh and Boston, the East Final. A lot of people predicted this matchup going in. Great storylines with it, of course. You have Jerome McGinley rejecting the Bruins. So it's a nice little, fun little thing there. But can we see the Boston Bruins and Tuukka Rask? I think this is really going to come down to goaltending. Can Tuukka Rask stop that high-powered offense of the Pittsburgh Penguins? And can the Bruins really attack the net, much like they did with the Rangers in the second round?
That's the Pittsburgh Penguins are going to be tough to stop. Tuukka Rask, I think, is their next goalie for sure. There's no questions asked. Any team would like to have him, but I just don't think he's going to handle him. Vakoun, if he stays in, can he stop the Bruins? The Bruins have lots of firepower that are kind of underrated. I think that could go either way too. So it's going to be a heck of a
physical
series.
Guys who love to crash the net. Is that going to frustrate Vakoun?
I think the Bruins forwards are going to be more physical than the Penguins forwards, but the Penguins forwards have a lot more skill than the Bruins forwards. And you look at the Bruins defense; they're really banged up. Wade's trying to get back in the lineup, but he's having a tough time. There's a rookie in the lineup right now that's just been lights out since he's been out. So it'd be interesting to see as the series develops if Pittsburgh's talent outweighs the Bruins' finesse.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see how that's going to play out in the next few weeks in that series. I think it's going to go 7 games, and it's going to be one heck of a.
It's going to go duration, I think, too. Yeah,
it's going to go the distance, that's for sure. And it's nothing better than having a great Eastern Final. Too bad it's not the Stanley Cup. That'd be one heck of a matchup. All right, when we come back, we still got some great topics to talk about, including Alain Vigneault. Should he have been fired? Maybe he should have been their GM. Who knows? We'll tell you coming up in a bit.